Hey Tonya, thanks for coming over.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming over to give me some advice. Just sitting around the campfire, making some s'mores, and I've got a little glass of wine. Even though this is supposedly showing on a Thursday morning, we're actually taping this the night before, and yeah, I could really use some advice. You're an expert in the field of diversity and inclusion, and I work in the startup world, and I'm hoping you can give me some tips on getting more thoughtful about engaging a wider community.
Sure, absolutely.
So what are you up to these days?
Yeah, I'm up to a whole bunch. I mean, so much to share and in the context of our conversation, I'll start with, really how I am and even preceding that, I'll share a little bit of my background. So, most often I am referred to as Tonya Hampton, and affectionately, my father would say that I am Tonya Jackman Hampton, with doctor in front of it, because he wants to make sure that whenever I mention doctor, that Jackman, that maiden name, is sitting right there. So it's fun to refer to him and think about him, particularly as I think about our conversation today as well, because he is in my history. And when you talk about how am I doing, there's so much going on in the world. And connected to the what's going on is that history. But additional to my name, I actually am born and raised from Minnesota, as they say Minnesota, that kind of accent. And I have been also fortunate to live here the majority of my life. I left for 2 years. I went to undergrad in Atlanta. Prior to that, I actually went to Normandale Community College for 2 years. Transferred down to Atlanta. I went to Clark Atlanta University for another 2 years. And then I came back home, and fast forward about 10 years later, wound up getting 2 additional degrees from the University of St. Thomas. So that's my educational background. But in terms of more context about how I'm doing, being that I'm from Minnesota and the social unrest that has gone on due to the murder of George Floyd, that affects me. At the same token, I also have been blessed, even though the nation, the world has been affected by the social unrest, as well as the issues that are going on related to COVID or the virus. And I talk about the blessed part, and I'll mention that briefly and then shift to some more history related to how I'm doing. And the blessed part is I have, while COVID took my job, I was able to receive another opportunity, as well as since 2012, I've actually had a LLC. Sequel Consulting Group is my own independent consulting, where I've provided advice and facilitated sessions or keynotes for organizations on the topic of organizational development or diversity and inclusion. And so when I learned that my job was eliminated, I actually steepened the legs of my consulting firm and began working in sort of a collaborative fashion with the multitude of other consultants doing this work, or doing the work that I specialize in, and partnering with them to help organizations, and in some cases, startup organizations. Juxtaposition that, I actually received an offer early July that I'm super thrilled about. So I will be actually moving over to Hennepin Healthcare as their Chief People and Culture Officer. And I can't tell you how excited more I am about that opportunity. And just the smear smack of having people and culture in place of human resources just excites me. And the reason is because I do wholeheartedly believe that people are not resources. Sure, they show up on the account statement that way, but we absolutely need to be thinking about them as people. And I am excited to work with the people there, think about how we focus on the people aspects of the organization, as well as develop a culture. So that's the blessed part, right? That's the part that I have been able to benefit from during the crises that our nation or world is experiencing. And they really are, the crises really are two pandemics, right? So we've got two situations where we've got healthcare disparities that have impacted the nation, and health issues that have impacted the nation, as well as we've got the social unrest and disparities that exist there in relation to racial disparities that our nation suffers from, as well as around the world it's an issue. And so how am I doing? George Floyd's murder was about 15 blocks from my house. And that alone creates some unrest for me. It also is in an area where I caught the bus as a young woman. I would ride the bus from Chicago Avenue to my home in Bloomington, because actually my grandmother lived over on 40th and Clinton. And then my other grandmother and grandfather, they come from a legacy of startup. They created the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder.
Wow.
And so that is a newspaper company, the first Black-owned newspaper company in the state of Minnesota. It used to be the St. Paul Recorder and the Minneapolis, the St. Paul Recorder and the Minneapolis paper combined together, Minneapolis Recorder, combined together, it became the Minnesota Recorder, or Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, excuse me. You'd think I know this story, but at any rate, that was the overarching name of the organization. And with that in mind, we also have a road. My grandmother has her Namesake Street right now running across the front of the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. And then my grandfather has a Namesake Street that is a block behind Lake Street in South Minneapolis. What is to know about that, if audiences aren't aware, hopefully they are, is that was a lot of where the rioting and unfortunately the looting occurred, but more importantly, where a lot of the marching around social justice issues occurred there. So there was movement and activity going on to be able to support what happened to George Floyd and his family, and then also to address the issue of racial injustice. And so as we think about that has impacted how I'm doing, as well as COVID. My family personally has been impacted by COVID. And so I've had some sickness in my immediate family, and then even on my mother's side of the family, some of my relatives were ill. And then you layer on the news, right? And so those activities that we see on the news that are related to the virus, as well as related to all the racial issues that are going on, have had an overlay and an impact on my emotions and how I am as a being. And I would be remiss if I didn't share all those things. So I know it took a while to get to how I'm doing. I'm not okay in some respects. And it depends upon the day how I am doing. How we might be impacted because news stories come about. That also affects how I'm doing. But at the end of the day, I am grateful that I have resilience, and I'm grateful that my family has resilience and has the ability to continue to move forward, to create change in the world, and in particular, in my case, to be able to create change for organizations, for clients that I work with, and now soon to be Hennepin Healthcare. And so that puts some energy in me, right? And the desire to want to do more. And what I am committed to doing, even though there are tough days and emotional days, is I'm absolutely committed to ensuring that whatever I can do, I can create inclusive workplaces or places or spaces for individuals so that we can work towards, as a nation, as a society, to eliminate disparities that exist, to eliminate racial issues that exist, or isms that exist, right? To create a place where people feel like they are included and where they belong. And I'm committed to that for as long, perhaps maybe an unpopular statement, but I absolutely mean it, for as long as I can breathe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I'm super excited about your new job.
Thank
Number one. Yeah. And my heart goes out to you and your family for the difficult times that you've had, and I'm sure the difficult times we'll all have. And I'm also with you on the front lines as much as I can be to help drive some change, because we need it in Minnesota and the US. So to that, it's been a long time since we worked together, 17 years since we were down the cube from each other in Brooklyn Park at Medtronic, and we've both grown so much since then. And I know you've amassed this amazing body of knowledge around diversity and inclusion, and I'm hoping that you can share a few tips with me and with everybody on what can startups do, and also what can organizations do to be more inclusive. Do you have a few thoughts along these lines?
You know, I do. I wanted to ask you, Mary, how are you? I mean, that, right? We checking in on you and how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm okay. I have many family members who are of color, including Black family members and nieces and nephews, and I worry about them. And but we're a progressive family committed to change. So we probably haven't struggled as much as you have in your family, but my immediate family is doing everything we can to affect change. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome. And, you know, we had a chance to catch up a little while back, but I just wanted to check in again and see how you're doing. There's been even more that has transpired since we last talked, right? So never a kind of a quiet moment per se.
Yeah, right.
But you're right, commitment is important, and that's what's important for organizations too, particularly startups. I mean, you have, as a startup company, you have no better chance to start off right and start off a way at which you're being thoughtful about how you lead your business and what you put together for that business. And one of the things that I think is a misstep for a lot of organizations, and I'm speaking only from my lens, so I recognize that it might be narrow. But what I want to say is that so often organizations set out to create a business plan, and that business plan has strategic priorities in it. But not one of them is about creating an organization that is diverse and inclusive. There's an intent to think that they're going to have that within their organization, right? Or an unconscious perspective that, yeah, that of course that's going to happen. But what we have to remember is, in order to have a diverse and inclusive work environment, you actually have to be very directive in that process and planful, just as if you are putting together your business plan. And so if you're going to have 5 priorities for your business, your startup, or a longer term business, it should reflect that you've got to focus on diversity and inclusion and creating an organization where people belong, where they feel like they belong. So that's the first thing, is set out on your business strategy, and within that business strategy, you've got a diversity and inclusion priority. It's not a standalone effort. It's one that is embedded in your overall strategic plan as an organization. The other thing I would say that's important is to really commit to learning and having conversations, particularly about race, right? Our country was founded, right, so many years ago, and one of the very first topics we talked about was race. It's how we separated people. And it has created boundaries and barriers and limitations. And we've got to recognize that and understand that that is so embedded in what we have. Slavery was only 155 years ago. And for 400 years, we separated people. When the country was founded, it was founded in the hands of Native Americans. And we've not fully acknowledged all of the wonderful people that have been on this, right, in this country. And so we've got to be able to, as organizations, to be willing to have conversation about race. It's who we are. Mm-hmm. And if I want to learn about you, Mary, or if you want to learn about me, we should be okay with saying, I'm a Black woman, you're a white woman. Let's have that conversation. And what's underneath that, right? Because there might be even other races involved in who we are as people. We also should continue to learn about, right? Read about it. And so there are so many books. So you want to talk about race, white privilege, white supremacy, My Grandmother's Hands, I'm reading that book now. There are so many books that could be read about this topic. There's so many articles that could be read, and those are just a few. And so continuing that as a lifelong journey, it can't stop. And then you have to take action from that as an organization too. What did you learn? And I'm not saying just focus on race, but that's a primary. And you should also focus on the other dimensions of diversity and learn about that and read on that as well. Companies should also create policies and procedures that are ones that are creating equity. And so creating those policies and procedures with an equity lens, work to mitigate bias in your policies and procedures. Companies should also think about how they focus on their culture and what are the important elements for their culture, and how do you embed that in your mission, vision, values, your competencies, and your policies and procedures, so that when people come to the organization, they know what you're about, where you're headed, what your values are, and how they should behave. That creates a culture. That ensures that as you are embedding welcoming in your culture, that everyone feels welcomed, right? As an example. And then finally, really being willing as an organization, no matter what your size is, whether you're small or large, medium, whatever, being willing to contribute to the community, right? One example that comes to mind is a company that I know that actually they sell socks. And for every pair of socks that you buy, they donate a pair of socks. Socks is the #1 thing that people who are homeless don't have. And so if companies can do things like that, maybe they don't make socks, but something that they do can be contributed to the community. So those are the things that I would share.
Okay, yeah, I really like that. So commitment, policies and procedures, learning, giving back, and which one did I miss?
Creating a culture.
Creating a culture. So what are some specific things that you've seen organizations do to really drive the culture to be inclusive?
Oh, yeah. So I mentioned the mission, vision, values, behaviors, really embedding in the language of those items, the language of inclusion, or the language of diversity and equity. Thinking about your target, kind of the overall, what are you trying to reach goal, and ensuring that that's represented in those items, your mission, vision, values, and behaviors.
Yep.
Also making sure that it becomes a change in communication effort, right? So that the conversation doesn't just stop in those items, but that you're actually constantly reiterating over and over messaging that allows or creates the understanding that diversity, inclusion, equity is important in the organization. Those would be examples. And so creating for as long as the company exists, a communication plan that reflects your efforts and how it coincides with the other strategic priorities within the organization. So if the organization is doing supply chain efforts, making sure that part of the supply chain efforts is a partnership with diverse organizations.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been difficult for large corporations or small corporations to recruit people of color and people of diversity. Do you have any advice for how organizations can improve their pipeline to be so that the pipeline is more representative of the national customer base and purchaser base?
Oh, sure. The first things they have to do is go outside of their network, right? Be willing to step outside of your neighborhood or your immediate family sphere and have conversations with people that you wouldn't otherwise have conversations with. Be willing to have conversations about their background and understand who they are as a person. Really see them beyond the experience. Experience is absolutely necessary, and we should be asking questions about experiences. But if you build relationships with people, you get to know who they are, the people who they know, and the people who they know. And then over time, you become more familiar with people who actually have experience in different communities that you're not a part of.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is be willing to do the work and take the time, right? So we say that we want to hire somebody in 30 days, and before we know it, 60 or 90 days has passed by, right? And so being okay with waiting that long to make a hire, to make the right hire, the person that is experienced and the person who's diverse in the situations where you're trying to increase diversity, visible diversity in your organization, or even sometimes a diversity that we can't see. Perhaps someone has a disability that we're not aware of, but working towards creating an organization that is representative of your customer base takes time and takes effort. There are obvious things that people can reach towards, and that's if they know about them. And hopefully by now they do, since our vice president is actually from a historical Black college. Nominating vice president, I will say. She went to Howard, and so going to historical Black colleges is a resource that people can go to identify diverse talent. And the different colleges that I'm mentioning, they actually have diverse populations as well. Of course, the majority of the population is Black, but there are other students too that attend there from different races. So those are resources. And then just obviously going to other colleges to recruit talent. And no matter what their background is, obviously, again, you're looking for experience, making sure that they meet the qualification of the job. And then you're thinking about what is the mix that you need in your organization. And so those are other tactics that you can take to diversify. And then internally, being able to also cultivate inclusion is essential, because you can certainly work to recruit diverse talent and bring them into your organization. But if you don't have a culture of inclusion, they're not going to stay. And so sometimes people ask me, what should organizations focus on first? And I actually say that you should focus on creating a culture of inclusion first, so that when you do recruit the diverse talent, they are there, staying there. Yeah.
And they feel comfortable fully participating.
Exactly. Yeah. People feel like they can contribute their voice, they can make a difference, they can create ideas, be a part of innovation. Exactly.
Yeah. Just this morning, I had a call with the National Black MBA Association, the local Twin Cities chapter, to get more engaged with their program and develop a partnership with them.
That's a great example. And I didn't even mention the networks. And that is an example of a network that people can reach to. And there are a multitude of different race type networks or other dimensions of diversity groups that exist that people can reach to recruit talent. Absolutely.
Okay, great. I think we're about out of time.
Oh, wow, it goes by so fast. I know one question that you asked me offline that I want to just add here is the Minneapolis Foundation.
Yeah.
The Minneapolis Foundation. I'm a board member there. And the Minneapolis Foundation focuses on contributing to different organizations or the community to create equity, in short, right? And how it does that is actually people can set up charitable funds through the Minneapolis Foundation to be able to contribute to the different communities and organizations to receive funding for health care or for social issues, to take social action, or for education, for farming, like you name it. There are a variety of different ways that you can request that your dollars are allocated towards once you make that charitable donation and you establish a fund. And then over time, you can direct your dollars to different areas to be able to make a difference.
Amazing. Who should people contact if they're interested?
Oh, yes. I would just call the direct number, the Minneapolis Foundation.
Okay.
And anyone there can help you. You tell them that you want to begin to understand how you can be a person that makes a charitable donation to create a fund. And they will know exactly what to tell you.
Okay, great. Well, it was so wonderful to see you again, Tonya. Thanks for educating me and everybody on this super critical topic.
You're welcome.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. It was great to see you, and take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too. I hope to see you soon.
I hope to see you soon as well, in
Perfect.
person.
With a hug.
That's exactly right.
Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.